Jen and Cam are two funny ladies who like to talk about murder, mass murder, murder-suicide, serial killers, spree killers, thrill killers, contract killings, honor killings, and a whole lot of other shit too heinous for me to list here. If you're disturbed by this sort of content, you may want to listen to something else. And if you're a child trying to listen to our true crime podcast, well, you better ask your mama.
This season on DNA ID, a couple shot at a campground, a realtor waylaid at a home showing, a bookstore owner stabbed among her volumes, a young soldier dumped in a parking lot. What do all these tragic cases have in common? They are all cold cases solved after decades of frustration and futility by forensic genealogy. I'm Jess Betancourt, and in Season 2 of DNA ID, I'll bring you 24 more fascinating cases in which the killer eluded generations of investigators until science and some crafty genealogists cracked them at long last. Listen to DNA ID on your favorite podcast platform. New episodes drop every other Monday.
Hi, Jen.
Hey, Kim, how are you?
I'm pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. You got a big case for us today, right?
This is something else.
Or that's what you claim.
No, it's
cool.
For reals. It's for reals. And there's just a lot to it. I say we get started. Lots and lots of names.
Good. We should dig in because somebody complained that they had to wait 3 whole minutes before we got to the story.
Well, that's a super dog story, which also I want to include that just a little content warning. This deals with incest, child abuse, child rape. Big content warning. Very big, very large. So you ready to go?
Yep, let's do it.
It's a parent's worst nightmare. The abduction of a child is more than traumatic, but what if 2 of your children simply disappeared? That's exactly what happened on March 25th, 1975, when 12-year-old Sheila Lyon and her little sister, 10-year-old Katherine, or Katie, as she often went by, departed from their home to walk half a mile to the local shopping mall in Wheaton, Maryland, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C. Mom was fine with this. She said, you go ahead, have fun, just be home by 4 o'clock. The girls made it to the mall. By all accounts, they were seen, but they never made it home, and they would never be seen again. Now, sadly today, as we know, all too often, the disappearance or abduction of a child is way more familiar than it was back in 1975. It was still somewhat relatively unheard of. Now, maybe this is the news, the internet, things like that we get all this going. But just to kind of put a little timeline on it, Etan Patz, the 6-year-old boy who disappeared from Manhattan in 1949, was actually the first child to be featured on a milk carton, and that was 1979. So that was 4 years after the disappearance of the little Lyon girls.
Unreal.
Law enforcement hit it hard, and they were sure they would find out what happened to the girls. But as is so often the case, hours turn into days, and days turn into years. There were many suspects along the way. There's Fred Coffey, who is in prison for the murder of a 10-year-old named Amanda Ray. There's also Arthur Good, who was electrocuted in 1984 for the murder of 9-year-old Jason Verdow. But he also murdered an 11-year-old by the name of Kenneth Dawson. But it was little Jason's murder that actually got him convicted and sentenced to death. There's also the convicted kidnapper, raper, counterfeiter, and suspected serial killer, James Mitchell Mike DeVerdelippen. Sorry if I butchered that last name. So there's many suspects that were in the pool, if you will. The case would go cold for decades until a sergeant by the name of Chris Hamrock was on it. Now, he was one of the only officers still at the station, as all the others before him had retired. So he was fairly young when all this started going on. Hamrock had created a new team to work the case when he stumbled upon something, and this something would change everything. This case has so many twists and turns. I can't even tell you. I was going to have to put up a billboard with names and to tag them all together and how they go together. Mm-hmm. But let me tell you, this guy and his team, Dog with the bone. Unbelievable. And this is truly like my, I don't know love letter to them and and another person, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Just that they never gave up. This is the story of the Lyon Sisters. It's 2013 at the Montgomery County PD offices in Gaithersburg, Maryland. Sergeant Hamrock is looking into a man by the name of Ray Molesky. Now, Ray was a criminal and a child pedophile. He was involved in a child sex ring. Sergeant Hamrock was trying to determine if, maybe, just maybe, he was involved in the disappearance of the sisters. Ray Molesky this is how he operated. He would get these young teenage boys to work with him, pay him to help lure girls to him. Now, he was rumored to have sex parties in which he would trade these young victims to other pedophiles. I mean, when I say the story has a lot of upsetting elements, this is just the beginning. Now, the sex crimes would not be what put Ray in prison. In November 1977, 41-year-old Ray got into an argument with his wife over the use of her car to go pick up their 15-year-old son, who had stayed the night with a friend. Ray would later tell investigators that while the two were fighting, his 17-year-old son joined in the fight, and his wife, 37-year-old Dolores, stepped out of the room. Well, as soon as she stepped out of the room, she heard a shotgun blast, and she came running back into the room. That's where she was shot dead by her husband, Ray. The bullet actually went through her body and hit her youngest son, a 7-year-old, in the mouth. Ray rushed the child to the hospital, who thankfully survived. Ray then turned himself into police, and he was convicted on 2 counts of murder. Now, later on, witnesses would come forward and claim that he killed his family because they had found out that he was involved with the missing Lyon sisters. And he killed them, of course, to shut them up.
And don't forget, disfigured his 7-year-old son. Horrible.
So as the sergeant was trying, and he was really trying, he was not able to link Ray to the girls and their disappearance. Ray died in prison in 2005. So honestly, with Ray, and not much more to go on, he was kind of at a standstill. Frustrated by it all, he decided that the case would not be able to move forward, and he would have to make the heartbreaking decision to inform the parents of Sheila and Katie that the case would not be resolved. So I'm not really sure why things happen the way they do, but I wholeheartedly believe that sometimes, maybe it's fate. It's supposed to happen. Or maybe, just maybe, there's a little angel out there coming in for the assist. But the sergeant found something. Detective Hamrock found a statement that he had never run across, never run into, never read, never seen, which was really strange since he knew this case forwards, backwards, sideways, every which way. There were a total of 20 boxes full of witness statements, photographs, you name it. And when I say witness statements and interviews, just wait till you hear how much work they do. The statement that Sergeant Hamrock found was given by a young man by the name of Lloyd Welch. Now, at the time, Lloyd was only 18 years old. In this statement, Lloyd claimed to have witnessed the 2 young girls being taken. Now, even more strange was at the top of the paperwork was a handwritten phrase, and it said, polygraph -lied in big letters. Now, Lloyd would claim that he did make up a bunch of the story at the time about witnessing the abduction of the girls, but that was far from all. In his description of the abductor, Lloyd mentioned that the man walked with a limp. Now, this is what interested the sergeant at first. This would be the connection that he needed because Ray Molesky had such a limp. Now, police need to locate Lloyd to get to the bottom of this, and it won't take long because, you see, Lloyd is currently in prison at James T. Vaughn Correctional Center in Delaware. And boy, does he have quite the lengthy rap sheet. Now, these charges, and these are from across the states, mostly the East and the Southeast, but these are multiple charges in multiple states. I just condensed them to instead of naming every state, but here you go. Such charges include, but are not limited to, larceny, burglary, assault and battery, robbery, sex assault on a 10-year-old, drunk driving, sex assault on a minor, and finally, yet another sex assault on a minor. And it would be this one that landed him in prison for a nice, long little stay, which was in Delaware.
As that's where he should be. But yes. Big red
That's
flags for the Lyon sisters, though, don't you think?
Just wait. I'm telling you. Investigators are now starting to wonder if the two of them were in cahoots all those years ago, that perhaps Lloyd was actually one of those young teens who helped lure girls for Molesky. Now, remember, he's only 18 at the time. Police needed to pull Lloyd in and find out what he knows. And in October of 2013, that's just what they do. And here's where the story begins. And boy, is it a long one. They learned that Lloyd is due to get out of prison, not in a short amount of time, but he is coming up for parole in the next few years. We'll put it that way. So they are in a little bit of a crunch. They need to get to him and get some information out of him before he's out. Now, Jen, here's where you need to put your seatbelt on, because I am not kidding. Here's where all the lies and the falsehoods start. Now, you got to stay with me. It is a lot. Lloyd comes in and he agrees to speak to investigators. Detective Dave Davis comes to talk to him. And Dave Davis is, he walks in and this is what he's greeted with. I know why you're here. You're here about those two missing kids. Wow. Okay. Because it's been a while. You know, this is 2013 and the girls were taken in 1975. Okay. Well, Detective Davis and Lloyd would be spending a lot of time together starting now. And the way that the detective would work his deal is he would be the friend. I don't want to say good cop, bad cop, but he would be the friend to Lloyd. And this was the tactic that worked for him. Now, there's going to be 3 other investigators that we meet in this story, and they all have a different role. But this one he's the friend. And this is the one that Lloyd tends to trust. And whenever he gets a little angry, he always demands to see the Detective Dave.
Okay.
So Lloyd reiterates his story that he witnessed the 2 girls being led to the car by a man, and the car took off with them in it. The girls were crying, he says, and they didn't want to go with the man. When Detective Davis shows him a photo of Ray, he jumps up and he says, yep, that's the guy. That's the man right there. That's him. So this differs from his statement that he gave earlier in 1975, but he does not yet know that the detectives have that original statement. So they didn't tell him that when they first pulled him in. They just wanted to see what he would say coldly, without knowing much. In Lloyd's original statement, Lloyd said that there was a man walking around the mall with a tape recorder and he was talking to girls, interviewing them, if you will. The man then took the 2 girls, the 2 sisters, and made a getaway in a red Camaro. Now, that was what Lloyd claimed back in 1975. However, there were also reports of a young teen following around young girls that day as well. Now, this would fit into the idea of how Ray Molesky would get young girls to molest, and Lloyd could have been the young teen working for Ray to lure him in at that time. Now, strangely enough, old Lloyd claims he just doesn't remember being at the mall that day. And, it's been almost 40 years. He just can't remember. He just can't remember, Jen. Now, he claimed he never went to the mall when they all know that that's a lie. The officer hands him a copy of his statement to read while the officer leaves the room. When police give him a sketch of the young man that was at the mall that day, because there was a sketch created by a witness of the young man that day. And let me tell you, he looks an awful lot like Lloyd from his mugshot, a recent mugshot from that time period.
I can't look at a sketch and say, oh, yeah, that looks like the guy. Or I do, and everything looks like, yeah.
Because he was a hippie.
Maybe.
With a little
I don't know.
mustache.
I thought another sketch looked exactly like the perpetrator, and that was not who it was.
Oh.
Turned out it wasn't.
When police give him the sketch of a young man that was seen at the mall that day, let me tell you, he looks an awful lot like Lloyd. Now, Lloyd at this time, just for a little reference, was kind of a hippie, had longer hair, had like a pencil-thin mustache, and the sketch looked pretty much just like that. Now, Lloyd claims he still can't remember. He just can't remember anything. So not wanting him to shut up, Detective Dave assures him the photo is just a starting point. What they need now is to find the man who was responsible. Detective Dave needs Lloyd to keep on talking, so he gives him an out. He shows Lloyd a photo of a man and then tells Lloyd that the man in the photo is Ray Molesky, is now dead. And, basically they just want to know what else Lloyd knows. What does he know about Ray Molesky? What does he know about Ray Molesky and this crime? He's kind of giving him a little bit of wiggle room, I guess, if you know what I'm saying. The detective then tells him that they know that Ray Molesky used young men to lure young victims to him, and sometimes that meant he would give the young men drugs to help sweeten the deal. He basically indicated that if Lloyd helped this man, then Lloyd was a victim of Molesky as well. That's basically what he was trying to tell Lloyd. Now, the ploy didn't work. Lloyd's still claiming he didn't remember anything, but he definitely would not have been involved in hurting those girls.
Mm-hmm. That's what they all would say, wouldn't they?
Mm-hmm. So it was time for a break, but the detective left the report on the table for Lloyd to read. When Detective Dave came back in, Lloyd agreed that it was him back then, and that was his report, but he still doesn't remember anything like that. That he basically did say all that, but he lied, or he can't remember at the time. The questioning would go on for hours. It was grueling for all of them. Now, Detective Dave assured Lloyd that they just wanted to know positively that Lloyd saw Ray Molesky at the mall that day. Oh, and they needed him to sign this little paper, just a little paper for him. You know what this paper is going to say, right?
Oh, yeah, of course.
So Lloyd refused. He was like, I'm not signing this, not with this sentence, not with this word. So they reworded it several times. It was a little back and forth, back and forth. Detective Dave is basically trying to convince Lloyd that this was just simply a form to protect him. Now, mind you, Detective Dave is his friend who's looking out, right? So the document stipulated the following: that Lloyd would talk to detectives about the Lyon case, but that he was not involved. Immunity is offered to you as long as you're honest, basically. His statements would not be used against him, but this agreement would not provide him with immunity for any crimes that he may have committed against the Lyon sisters. Now, he freaks out at this point. He's like, no, not that sentence. No. Well, Detective Dave, he got in there, took some convincing, but Lloyd finally signed the paper, and Detective Dave basically said, okay, let's have it. Let's hear what you know. Still claiming he doesn't remember anything from then, he offers that maybe he is just confused, or maybe he forgot. But of course, his story changes yet again. Now Lloyd says, yes, I was at the mall that day with my girlfriend, Helen Craver, and both of them saw Ray Molesky walking around with a tape recorder recording young girls, two of which were the sisters. Now, all the time, he is still denying any and all involvement in any of this. At this point in his life, Lloyd was working as a carnival ride operator, Jen. Works at a carnival.
Oh, nice.
I thought you'd like that. This is where he met Helen, and the two immediately shared the same passion: drugs. The couple would go on to have 3 daughters, with neither of them being able to hold a job for very long. They're bouncing around the whole eastern United States, staying in people's backyards. Just they'd go from here, work enough to make a little money, and move on. And they had 3 babies together, doing this lifestyle. That's crazy, I think. When it was time for another break, the detective steps out, but he left that little document, that little agreement on the table for Lloyd, knowing Lloyd would read it, which he does. Lloyd looks it over, and the one funny thing about those interrogation interview rooms is that they have cameras and microphones on them. Now, a lot of times, I just don't know if people realize that or what. I don't know. But just because the officers leave a room does not mean that you aren't still being watched and still being listened to. Cue the camera and the mic. Only moments go by as Lloyd is looking at that statement when he says out loud, "Oh, they got me. They got me." He knew that they knew more than he thought, and they would be able to pin part of this on him. I guess he finally reread the document saying that, you get immunity as long as you're not involved in any of this. The immunity goes out the window if we find you're involved. And that's where he says, they got me. They got me. At this point, they really don't have enough on him to charge him with anything, but the detective has a parting question for Lloyd. And this is one of my favorite strategies police use. It's the old, I know you didn't do it, but what do you think the killer did with them chat? That's kind of like, remember OJ's?
Oh, yeah. If I did it, this is what I would have done.
Yep.
Or this is how I would have done it.
Exactly. Surprisingly, people say way too much with this. And I like this little tactic because normally I think it's funny. The truth is going to come out some way or another. And sometimes it comes out just like this. So Lloyd says, you just want my opinion? The detective's like, yep, just your opinion. Just you and me. Just us two talking, chatting. Lloyd says, oh, he probably killed him, raped him, killed him, and then burned him. Another detailed description for just a guess. Am I right?
I would think so, yeah.
Okay, they have to let him go for now. I think there was a total of 9 interrogations, if I'm not mistaken. But so here we go. He's free to go because he's in prison. They know where he is, so it's not like that. But Lloyd is once again pulled in for an interview in February 2014. This time he would submit to a polygraph, and once again, shocker, he fails once again. I think we all saw that coming because, he lied. When they told him he lied, he was furious, and he claimed he had nothing to do with the disappearance of Sheila or Katie. And he demanded to see Detective Dave Davis, because that's what he does every time he gets mad. Lloyd said to the detective that he had something he wanted to say, and that is that he did not have anything to do with the missing girls. However, that photo he was shown, that one of Ray Molesky, Lloyd said that he used to do drugs together at Ray's house. And once when they did drugs, Lloyd said he thinks he saw one of the sisters at Ray's house.
That's very interesting.
This is like a fishing, you throw that line out there. I don't know why I make analogies.
Get what you get.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a dork. What can I say? Once again, Lloyd claims, his memory is fuzzy, and he claims he can't remember where the house is located. He does describe the house, or shall I say the area which he claims he saw the girls. He mentions a basement with a small window. The basement had a small room in it with a lock on it in the back. Lloyd said he never went into that room because it always was locked. One day, he went to the home, and he was going to enter through the downstairs door. Now, this is from the back, right? The older houses have the entrance that goes down the stairs to the little stairwell, that kind of arrangement.
Uh-huh.
So he claims he was going to enter through the downstairs door, but once he got there, he peeked in the window of the door, and he saw them in the basement with no clothes on. There was Ray, along with 2 other men in the basement. He could not see who they were because he said they were raping the girls. When one of them screamed, Lloyd got scared and he ran away. And that's what he's claiming. Now, Lloyd's story keeps changing, and memory does fade. I think we can all agree on that, but the truth is the truth. If you stick to the truth never changes. And with a case like this, I'm pretty sure details would not exactly be something you would forget. Police are now pretty definite that Lloyd knows more. And with him saying he was there, basically he's implicating himself. He put himself at the scene of the crime. So they know he knows more. Now, the following information comes from this book about this case. And the name of the book is The Last Stone by Mark Bowden, Bowden. And let me say, you have to get this book. If you're interested in the story, you have to get this book because it's good. But here we go. Yes, to say the least. Many details I did not want to put in here. Way too graphic. So here you go. So the Welch Clan, that's, Lloyd Welch, this is a big family. They're one with a long history of abuse and poverty and many, many secrets. Alcohol and drugs were present everywhere. It was not unusual for fathers to rape and beat their children and for their sons to rape and beat their sisters as well as any of their relatives. In fact, with this family, it's pretty much normal practice. The family grew up with incest, and they basically tried to keep a lid on it, keep it from the public's peering eyes, if you will. The family clutches were strong, and all knew to keep their mouths shut when it came to what went on inside the family. There was Uncle Richard, or Dickie, or Uncle Dickie. I call him a couple things in here, maybe because I'm being mean, but and his wife, Aunt Pat. Uncle Dick was Lloyd's father's brother. Uncle Dickie was not the man he once was, and Aunt Pat was not shy about sharing her dislike of his family. Yet, they were still family. There was Teddy, his younger cousin, who grew up much of his life not really wanted. We'll get into that. That's a terrible story. There's also his cousin Henry. There's Lloyd's father, Lee, who had a long history of sex abuse and child rape, and his wife, Edna, who spent much of her life either looking the other way or flat out denying any of this was taking place. All of these characters will make an appearance in this twisted tale. So Lloyd's rough start to life, began very early. His father, Lee, was driving drunk when Lloyd's mother was in the car, and he wrecked, killing her, and she happened to be pregnant with twins, all three of them dying. Lloyd was just 2 years old at this point. His father would go to prison for manslaughter, and Lloyd went into the foster care system. Until one day, literally, his dad showed up with a new wife to take Lloyd, who was now 7 at the time. Lloyd would say he liked his new stepmother, Edna, but when his father was drunk, he would beat and rape Lloyd often, even pulling a shotgun on him, saying he was going to kill him. Now, he's just a little kid, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Lloyd started drinking early, and by the time he was a teen, he was doing any and all drugs he could get his hands on. And I'm talking PCP, LSD, Coke, you name it, alcohol, whatever. He would do it all. At this point, he's a teen, and he would run away often, but the police would always bring him back. In 1973, that's when he met Helen at that carnival, and this would begin the years-long relationship with the two of them, and lots of partying and living on the fridge. Like I said, holding a job for only long enough to get more money and then run off again.
Mm-hmm.
Police now reach out to Lloyd's ex-girlfriends, and they learn quite a bit. They find out that Lloyd was abusive. We knew that. When they found out he really liked drugs, like you name it, he did it. They also learned that he would threaten a girlfriend when she would try to leave him, and that they were all very fearful of him, claiming he was very scary and violent. In a bold move, at this point, police decide to hold a press conference and announce they have a potential suspect in the Lyon case. And that person is Lloyd Lee Welch. Now, John and Mary Lyon, the girls' parents, made the following statement. Quote, March 25th will mark 39 years since Kate and Sheila were taken from our family. The fact that so many people still care about this case means a great deal to us. That's heartbreaking. I can't imagine. I just can't. Now, holding this press conference was huge news. It was February 11th, 2014. And basically what they wanted is they wanted potential witnesses to come forward. They knew that this would either shut Lloyd up for good, but more than likely, the way that he likes to talk, this is going to push him into continuing to do what he does best, lying with fragments of truth. And that is what the officers needed to sift through. Police pull him in for an interview on March 25th, 2014. Now, this happens to be the anniversary of the abduction of Sheila and Katie, hoping to get him to break and tell them what they're now suspecting. Now starts the game of cat and mouse. What the investigators need is for Lloyd to fess up. And what Lloyd needs is to see what exactly they have on him. So begins this cat and mouse game. This time, we meet two more detectives, Detective Katie Leggett and Mark Janney. And they're not nice at all. They're not like his best friend, Detective Dave, right? They go in and they go at him. They're pretty straightforward. They're, Detective Dave Davis played it more like, I understand. I'm sure you're upset. No, they're not like that at all. In fact, Detective Leggett goes in and she starts talking about, she's a mother, by the way. She talks about how many kids he has. He has so many kids all over the place, he doesn't even know how many he has. And he even asked her, so how many do I have? You cannot make that up because he has no idea.
Really?
He would often impregnate young women, I would say girls, 17, 18, and leave them. Just didn't want to deal with them. So, for real. So anyway, the detectives go in and they tell them that they're eyeing him for a series of rapes and missing girls from all over the country. They tell him that when these crimes were committed, they didn't have the technology that they have now. They didn't have DNA analysis available back then, but they do now. Lloyd gets upset, saying he didn't do any of these crimes. He did none of these. He doesn't know what they're doing. He's having a fit. But what he doesn't know is police don't have any of this. They're just making it up. They're making it up to see where it's going to take him. Detectives tell him that he needs to go over that day, once again, that he claims he saw the girls in Ray Molesky's basement. They need to know who the other men were in that basement with the girls. He starts to open up. He said he's not sure if the person's still alive, but he's afraid of this person. And so he's hesitant to give up the name because he's afraid that the person's going to come after his family and kill him. All those family everywhere that all have different last names that this person could not ever find. But yet, nonetheless, he's afraid. Lloyd gives them a name. Thomas Teddy Welch the cousin of Lloyd, Uncle Thomas's son. Now, I mentioned him earlier, and here's his path. Lloyd said that one of the men in the basement that day was his very own cousin, Teddy. He also claims that Ray was not actually involved, but it was Teddy and another man who abducted those girls on that March day and forced them into Teddy's blue Camaro. Now, notice the color of the cars changed from red to blue. Still a Camaro, but a different color. Did I mention that the first time he told the story, the car was a black Plymouth muscle car that belonged to Ray? Yeah, so here we have the black Plymouth, and then we have the red convertible, and we have the blue, not convertible, I'm sorry, Camaro. Lloyd shuts up and tells them he doesn't know anything else. He doesn't know anything else. Now, detectives have not heard of Teddy Welch yet, so they look into him. Now, they learn at this point in time, Teddy was young. He was only about 11 years old at the time of the disappearance of the girls. Now, this could fit as a potential young boy that Molesky would use to lure girls for him. The girls would be, 10, 12, and 11, right in that age. So that makes sense. So they think that possibly, maybe they're onto something. Maybe there is a little shred of truth to this due to his age. Now, investigators reach out to Teddy Welch for a sit down, and let me tell you, does he have a story? There is a documentary called Who Killed the Lyon Sisters on Discovery Plus, and I give him a plug later. So I use that, and I use the book, and then 5 articles that I found, which I will all cite. The book gave me a lot more info on Teddy, but here we go. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
First, Teddy is adamant that he has nothing to do with any of this, and he's quite upset that Lloyd would even bring him into this situation. And he has no idea why Lloyd would do such a thing. Teddy tells investigators that Lloyd's father was an alcoholic who sexually abused Lloyd. We kind of already knew that from Lloyd. Teddy's father did very much the same thing to Teddy. Now, Teddy's home life was one of being tossed around to a lot of people. His mother left them when he was very young, and when Teddy went to a boys' home, he bolted one day because he'd heard rumors of where she lived, and so he made his way to her house and found her. She was living, with a new man, new family, new life. Now, Teddy made it to his mother's house courtesy of an older man who gave him a ride. And, he gave Teddy his number and said, you know what, should you ever need anything, you reach out, even if you just want to talk. It would not be a good move for Teddy to move in with his mother, and he was not really wanted in the home. So he called that older man, and the two of them started hanging out. The man would take Teddy to gay bars a few times a week. At the age of 15, Teddy was, and this is his words, in a relationship with a much older and very wealthy man, and his name was Leonard Krasel. Now,
Groomer.
I would use the word groomed, but Teddy used relationship. Okay.
Yeah, he was a groomer. Pure and simple. He was a groomer.
This relationship would continue well until Teddy was in his early 20s. The man had a lot of money, and he took Teddy all around the world. He gave Teddy a car, credit card, any clothes, anything that Teddy would ever want, he gave Teddy. And in exchange, you know what Teddy had to do. Well, how did all this begin, you wonder? Leonard and Teddy's relationship happened because, according to Teddy, his mother sold him or gave him or sold him interchangeably to Leonard, you ready? In exchange for a house full of carpeting. She wanted wall-to-wall carpeting. You can have Teddy as long as I get my house carpeted. Can't make that up.
She should have gone to Let's Make a Deal. What's that show where they always give away carpet in the 70s?
Teddy would move into Leonard's house, and going forward, Teddy was introduced as Leonard's foster son. And this is where all the, Teddy would get anything he wanted as long as he would agree to sex with the much, much older man.
Groomer.
Now, I needed to know more about this fella, so I Googled him. This is what I found out. In 2014, 77-year-old Leonard Krasel was sentenced to 20 years for reportedly sexually abusing 2 young boys. They were around 10 years old, by the way. 77 years old, 10 years old. This was in 2014. Krasel entered Alfred pleas to 2 counts of sexual abuse of a minor and a count of third-degree sex offense. Now, back in October 23, 2012, the Department of Social Services contacted the sheriff's office to report a rape of a 10-year-old boy. police went to the school to interview the boy who was having trouble getting the story out. The little boy asked that his brother, can my brother come into the room? And when the little boy did, he got his brother in there with him. That's when he really opened up and said that Krasel had been abusing not only him, but both of them by coming into their rooms at night, touching them inappropriately, and trying to get them to perform a sexual act on the older man. So that's where that fella is. But there's more, Jen.
At least he got caught finally.
In a weird twist, Teddy and Leonard, they began speaking again back in 1999. In fact, Leonard bought a house for Teddy, his wife, and his 2 boys to live in, while Teddy was then working for a company which was owned by Leonard. You know, Teddy even had a spare bedroom in the home for Leonard, so whenever he was in town, he could come over and stay the night. Little odd.
That was nice of him.
I think it's a little odd.
Not suspicious.
Well, and especially since you have 2 young boys in the home. Like, his sons were pretty young. So then I was like, yeah, those 2 boys that he molested and went to prison for were Teddy's boys. Those were his very own sons. You with me on
Very
that twisted
sweet.
turn right there?
Yep. That's so cool. What an
So police
idiot.
ask Teddy to take a polygraph, and he complies, and he fails. He takes 2 more, and he fails 2 more times. Still, he insists he has absolutely nothing to do with this abduction. Well, you know, this family, you just never know. Any and all of them could be in it, could be an accomplice. You don't know. Am I right?
Yep.
So Teddy decided to do some of his own investigation on his own, and he, in fact, found some paperwork that showed at the time of the abduction, he had shattered both of his arms, meaning that both of his arms were in heavy cast up to the shoulder. So he was not at the mall that day. And if he were, he had those cast. And with all the witnesses that they talked to, someone would have surely mentioned a young boy with 2 cast following the Lyon sisters around, and nobody had. And they had multiple witnesses that day. In April
Unreal.
2014, they interview Lloyd yet again. Detective Dave's buddy role has worked wonders with Lloyd, and he would continue with the shtick. Lloyd is sticking with the Teddy story, and that Teddy was with an older man, and it was those 2 that abducted the girls now, right? Those 2. See how the story just keeps changing? 2014, they go back at Lloyd yet again for another interview. Lloyd is positive that his cousin, Teddy, along with the mystery man, were at the mall that day. Then Lloyd said, "What if I tell you who that other person is?" Jen, it's a miracle. I swear to goodness it is, I tell you. It's a miracle.
It is a miracle, but
He remembered the name.
why didn't you remember the name a long time ago?
Thank you. He has a name now for that mystery man, and that mystery man's name is Richard Welch, better known as Uncle Dickie. So now we got Teddy and Uncle Dickie in there. They're the ones that abducted those 2 little girls. At the time of the abduction, Uncle Dickie worked as a security guard near the mall. Lloyd tells the detectives that Teddy went inside the mall while Uncle Dickie remained in the car. Yeah, you ready for this? That car Uncle Dickie's in? Guess what, Jen? It's now a Ford station wagon.
Oh,
It's a Ford station wagon.
it's a magical changing car.
Yes, it is. Lloyd tells them that Teddy lured the girls outside to Uncle Dickie's waiting car. Lloyd then said, "Then we all left." Record scratch. Did you catch that? We all left.
Me.
Whether or not he realizes, Lloyd just put himself in the car right there in the commission of a crime. Police just let him keep talking. Wait, say it again. What'd you say?
I said good that he put himself in there. It's about, let's get this finished for the family.
Oh, yeah. But we're only on page 9. We got some more to go. Police just let him keep talking, and talking he does, changing the story as he goes. Lloyd now claims that the girls were taken to the basement, not to the basement of Ray Molesky, but to the basement of Uncle Dickie's house. Now, he continues to describe the basement just as he did before, exactly, without changing things. But this time, that's not Ray's basement. It's Uncle Dickie's. And he even includes that Uncle Dickie's basement had that locked door in the back. Now, while they're talking, Lloyd, once again, is about to give up a little bit of information here. Detectives ask Lloyd, what did Uncle Dickie do with those girls? And now, it is here that Lloyd mentions that they have a family in Thaxton, Virginia. This little fact, this little detail, which proves to be a huge one, has never come up before. So this is new information. Police learned that the Welch family has deep roots in the mountains of Virginia, specifically Taylor's Mountain. Now, Taylor's Mountain is located in the Blue Ridge Mountains north of U.S. Route 460 between Bedford and Roanoke. Now, the mountain was known for, at the time, back in the day, it was known for its thriving tomato canneries. And guess what else? Moonshine, baby. Bootlegging moonshine. Taylor's Mountain has kept a rough and tumble reputation where the locals stick to themselves and outsiders are not welcome. I imagine the Deliverance tune playing in the background here, if you know what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Local Danny Johnson runs a winery on the mountain, and he was interviewed for an article that I read, and it said that the area is known as the kind of place, quote, if something happened, they would get together then and decide how they wanted it to end up before they went to town, end quote. That gives you a pretty good idea what you're dealing with here. So the locals ran the mountain before anybody else. What happens on the mountain stays on the mountain. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
In the documentary on Discovery Plus called Who Killed the Lyon Sisters, locals are interviewed and said many people have went missing in the mountains, and it's kind of the place police don't like to venture to. One man who is interviewed says there's all kinds of bodies up on that mountain. So now, of course, police are starting to wonder. And maybe the truth is there. Maybe that mountain holds the answer to what happened to Sheila and Katie. On September 7th, 2014, a search begins in Bedford County, Virginia, and it is a daunting venture with lots of land to cover. It's pretty rural, too. As news spreads in the community of the investigators who are in town searching for evidence leading to the recovery or discovery of Sheila and Katie, family members get nervous. Police had been given permission to wiretap the home phone as well as install a camera across the street from the home of Patty Welch. Now that is, Dickie, Uncle Dickie and Patty, that's them. That's the couple. It's not long before an interesting phone call comes in from their daughter, Kimberly. She tells her mom to turn on the news. Her mom, of course, which I thought was funny, says, "Who's this?" And she's like, "It's your daughter." I thought it was kind of funny because that'd be something my mom would do. But anyway, I digress. She says, "It was found up on Lizzie's property." And Patty Welch says, "What was?" And the daughter, Kimberly, says, "The gravesite." And the mom says, "It's not their gravesites. They're still looking." And then the daughter says, "They are going to keep going until they find something." But the whole tone of the conversation gave me goosebumps. It was almost like they were preparing for them to find something. And they knew it.
No, they knew it was up there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They knew it.
Other calls that the police would record were Patty calling people and basically bullying them not into talking to anybody. "You don't talk to anybody. Do you understand me? You tell them you don't effing know anything." Blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm.
She's sweet.
In October of 2014, police pull in Connie Akers, Lloyd's cousin, who was living on the mountain at the time when the girls disappeared. During her police interview, she recalls Lloyd coming to the house with a very pregnant girlfriend. And that would be Helen, by the way. She claims, this is scary, she claims that Lloyd arrived with a large green duffel bag. Connie said that when he arrived, the three of them were outside talking when Lloyd walked up and tossed the bag in the middle of the group. She said Lloyd opened the bag and she was hit with a terrible smell. Inside, she could see bloody clothes. Lloyd told the group that he and Helen had bought some hamburger and it had went bad. It spoiled. And that's what was in
we've
the bag.
heard this before.
Mm-hmm.
Not good.
Okay. So this is Connie saying this. So now they need to know who all was in that group, and they need to make sure that the story holds water. So police need to get the story confirmed, so they reach out to Connie's brother, Henry. Now, he was one of the people in the group that day that was in that circle when that duffel bag was thrown there. In December 2014, they bring him in, and they're attempting to confirm the story. Henry, shall we say, was not as forthcoming as they had hoped. In fact, he was a bit combative, claiming he didn't know nothing. I don't know nothing. He did, however, confirm Connie's story that Lloyd arrived to the mountain with that duffel bag, but that is all he would confirm. He said that Lloyd said, you ready? It was a dead dog in the bag. And then he asked Henry to help him toss that duffel bag into a fire. That's right, a giant bonfire. Residents interviewed by officers claimed that there was a time right after the girls disappeared that there was a huge bonfire on the Welch property that burnt for several days. They remember it all these years later. As police worked the site where the bonfire once was, they locate a few things. They locate a piece of wire that may have belonged to Sheila. Sheila wore those little wire frame glasses that were popular in 75, with little kids.
Yep.
They also found a piece of necklace that Katie was last wearing when she disappeared. Most notably, they found bone fragments, and they were all tested. And guess what? They were human bones, in fact. There was also a human tooth that was located. Now, all of this was taken into evidence, but guess what? That tooth got lost. The tooth got lost.
Of course it did. Of course it did.
They're not sure if it just got lost, but in any case, it was lost.
It's gone.
Sadly, no DNA could be extracted from the bone fragments. There just wasn't enough there. I don't think you find human bone fragments very often. Do you? I wouldn't think so.
Not in burn pits? I would think not.
It is now January 2015. Time to take another crack at Lloyd. I'm telling you. This is why I admire these people. Talk about stamina. Just tenaciousness, I tell you. Guess what?
On which part? The police?
Yeah.
Right?
And him for holding out, I guess. You're going to be shocked. You're going to be shocked, Jen. Guess what? His story's going to change again. I know you're going to be shocked. This time around, Lloyd adds to his previous story of seeing the girls in Uncle Dickie's basement and that it scared him so badly, he and Helen needed to leave the area. What? That's right. So the officers, they're just letting him talk. You just talk all you want, Lloyd, because you're going to give us what we need anyway. So the officers just go, oh, okay, so where did you go? And he gave him a list of states, careful to leave out that one state they knew he had been to, Virginia, to Taylor's Mountain. Pushed on the issue, Lloyd said, yes, maybe they did go to Virginia first. Oh, yeah. What did you use to carry your belongings in for the trip, Lloyd? You and Helen. You had to have belongings. What'd you use? A duffel bag, a green duffel bag. It was his old army bag, he says. See, he just keeps
digging himself in. That's fine. Let him go. Let him go.
Thank you.
Talk it up, Lloyd.
That's right. Police then tell him that his family members have claimed that he had bodies in the bag. Of course, Lloyd denies the story. Detective Mark Janney, and he is the one that interviewed Lloyd earlier with Detective Katie Leggett. He's not your friend. Let's put it that way. Not like Dave Davis. He was in there, and he went with this approach. This is why I like this stuff, and this stuff always fascinates me. Detective Mark called it the reasonable person approach. Totally makes sense. So basically what he does is he goes through the whole case and how Lloyd changed the story over and over and over. From the color of the cars to the menagerie of people involved, all interwoven with lies. It's a lot to hear if you think about it. I mean, there was just so much to it. So Lloyd, of course, is not very happy, and he demanded to be taken back to a cell. Now, that reasonable person, basically, he's saying, if you're a reasonable person and we're interviewing you, the cars have changed, the people's changed, the names have changed, the locations have changed. Nothing has stayed the same. You implicated yourself with your cousin and your uncle. And then there's still another person that's going to make an appearance here because, of course, he's not done. So Lloyd's furious and he wants to be taken back to cell right now. I don't need to talk. He storms out. Well, guess what? Here comes Lloyd because he likes to talk. He comes back in and sits down. Can't make that up. He's a narcissist or he's talking to them because he's trying to buy more time. He wants to know what they know. Again, the little cat and mouse game, going round and round. Lloyd maintains that he had nothing to do with the girl's disappearance. He said that he and Helen did hitchhike to Virginia back in 1975, and that during that night, Uncle Dickie came to the house, and he, meaning Lloyd, witnessed Uncle Dickie and Henry toss that bag, that duffel bag, into the fire that was burning at their house. He then adds he believes the girls' bodies were in the bag. Okay.
That's what I've been thinking the whole time, right? Oh, no, Lloyd said that, right?
Yeah, Lloyd said that. Mm-hmm. So
okay,
he's giving them just a little bit more each time.
A little bit at a time.
Just a little bit, right? Truth's in there somewhere, along with a lot of lies.
I think we all figured out that those little girls were in that bag, right?
Mm-hmm. But there's
not just me. Yeah.
No, it's not just you, Jen. Here you go. It's now February 2015, and the detectives, they need to wrap this up. They're about over this, right? So Detective Katie Leggett comes up with a plan. This is ingenious, they need another witness. And the witness they needed to come forward and tell what she saw that night. And that witness was Helen, the girlfriend. There's only one little problem. Lloyd's girlfriend, Helen, had passed away in 2009. So they needed a plan. They needed a better plan. In fact, what they needed was to hear from her. They needed her words. And that's going to take some creativity on their parts. Now, this is good stuff. So they go in. They talk to Lloyd, the detective, Katie and Detective Mark. And they tell Lloyd that they found Helen's journal from way back then, from 1975. Now, Lloyd becomes fidgety, and he said, well, he didn't even know she kept a journal. Funny, because you know what? She didn't, but he didn't know that. They made that up. So he's getting all fidgety. He's getting he's sweating.
Yeah.
So here comes Lloyd. He's about to give some more information, fearing that mystery diary did, and he needs to cover his tracks before, as they do, as one that is guilty does. Lloyd says that on March 23rd, Uncle Dickie and Teddy came to his house with a plan to abduct someone from the Wheaton Mall. Lloyd asked the girls if they wanted to get high on marijuana, and they did. So this is how he was able to get them out of the mall and into the car. Now, Lloyd
the 7 and 10-year-old wanted to get high?
12 and 10. 12 and 10.
12 and 10. Okay.
12 and 10. But we'll get to that in a minute. Actually, we'll get to that in a minute. Lloyd said the younger one, who was Katie, did not want to go, but the older one convinced her to go. Now, I don't really buy this because I just don't. But anyway, maybe I'm wrong, because marijuana in 1975, I don't know. I wasn't there. Lloyd claims that once that they got into the car, one of the girls got in the front with Dickie, Uncle Dickie, and Teddy and Lloyd got into the back seat with the other. Now, Lloyd couldn't remember which girl was which one was in the front, which one was in the back, by the way. Lloyd then claims that the next day, Uncle Dickie and Teddy came to Lloyd's house, and Helen was there, the place they were staying, rather, because it wasn't really a house, place they were staying. And they asked them if they would babysit the two girls. Now, that means that the girls they made it through the night with Uncle Dickie and Teddy, which you have to think about that. Now, this is where the obvious lie hurts my heart. Lloyd claimed that the girls were happy and that Helen even played with them. And during all this time, neither girl asked to go back to the mall or back home. This is a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old that were abducted from the mall. He claims about after 5 hours, Uncle Dickie returned and paid Helen for babysitting them, but that was the last time Lloyd would see either of the girls. While they're getting close, the detectives need him to fess up, and he's just not giving up the goods. But you can see how infuriating this would be. Like, he just gives a little bit at a time, and then you got to weed through all the muck to find out what's really going on. It's May 2015. Detectives try once again to get Lloyd to confess. The detectives approach him straight on. They tell him that they know he knows more, and they want to hear it. They know the girls were with him in the car, and then while he was watching them. They know that those girls ended up in that fire in Virginia. They add that Virginia is seeking charges pertaining to this. And, by the way, Virginia carries the death penalty. Basically, they don't need to prove he killed them, but that he was responsible for their abduction leading to their death. Once again, here comes Detective Dave, and he goes in and he's playing the role of friend to Lloyd. The detective asked, who he, meaning Lloyd, thinks killed the girls. Lloyd said, well, it was Dickie and Lee. What? Lee? Who's Lee? Now that would be Lee Welch, Lloyd's father. Now to play catch up here, Lloyd has accused Ray Maliski, cousin Teddy, Uncle Dickie, and now his own father, Lee. And don't forget, he's involved in there too. So this is our suspect list is up to 5. Now the latest story goes like this. Uncle Dickie abducted and raped the girls. Then the girls wanted to go home. Uncle Dickie knew he could not let that happen because he would go to prison. So he called Lee Welch, which is Lloyd's dad, they're brothers, and asked him for help in getting rid of the girls, and that Lee helped. Then he adds that he believed that the girls were killed at Uncle Dickie's favorite fishing spot. So the next day, the detectives head down to that location, and, they're going to put that story to the test, basically. And strangely enough, looks like Lloyd was not telling the truth yet again. Jen, I know you're shocked. I know you're shocked.
Shocked. Utterly shocked. Never would have saw that coming.
The area was very open, and you couldn't do anything to anybody underneath there. It was a bridge, but it was open. It was sideways. So coming and going, you had a good view of what's going on underneath. It wasn't like a covered area. You know what I'm saying? But I think even more interesting was that, he said that this was a favorite fishing spot. No, the water was about 2 inches deep. It was not very deep. The rocks, you could step on rocks to cross it. So that's not going to be a favorite fishing spot. Frustrated, Detective Dave gets in the car to return from this meaningless trip. What happens next is what I imagine in a movie in a pivotal scene when the spotlight's put on it and the object and the audience to focus all their attention on. I'm not kidding. So Detective Dave is driving down the street. Right there in front of him, he sees it. The house. It's the house where the Welch family, was living in back in 1975. It's the house where Lloyd grew up in. He has an idea. You know what this idea is. The detective makes his way to the home. He gets out of his car and he notices while he went in back of the home, there's a basement entrance, just like Lloyd had described. It had steps leading to the basement, complete with the door, with the windows that allowed you to see inside the basement, to look inside. Entering the basement, you can clearly see there are separate rooms, with one in the back that once had a door separating it from the main room. It was exactly as Lloyd described, but it was Lloyd's very own basement, not one of the many family members he had routinely blamed for the abduction, rape, and murder of Sheila and Katie Lyon. It was right there all the time. Lloyd was telling the truth about the basement. He just didn't make it clear that the basement was, in fact, his family home.
Damn it, Lloyd.
A crew is called in to spray to see if they can detect any blood. Now, it's been a long time since, this crime occurred, so they're not really sure if anything's going to show up. But as we know, thank goodness, blood has a long shelf life. In fact, the spray is called Blue Star, and Blue Star can detect blood traces with the naked eye up to dilutions of 1 per 100,000. Holy moly. It lights up blue.
It does.
In the back room, which was once behind that locked door, in the very corner, they get their answer. It lit up all over the wall, down to the ground, in the crevices of the concrete. Someone lost their life in this cold, dank room, and the proof is all over the walls and floor. It was something, let me tell you. I saw the photo. It was awful. It's time for Detective Dave to do what he does best. He pretends to be Lloyd's friend in order to get him to talk. The detective goes at him with the old, I know you just got sucked into this. I know you didn't mean to, but you have to tell me what happened. Here comes story, I believe, number 9. Lloyd claims that Uncle Dickie was into making porn and selling it for cash. Now, you got to know, back in 1975, there was no internet. There was no, you know what I'm saying. I'm not even going to say all that stuff because I don't want to plug them, but it was a very black market kind of thing. And people that made porn would often sell it to friends or family or, somebody that they knew. That's how they did it. So he's claiming that Uncle Dickie was into making porn and selling it. One day, Dickie came to Lloyd and said he wanted to make porn and he wanted his help. Lloyd said that when he showed up that day to the house, Lee was on the camera shooting video of Uncle Dickie raping one of the little girls. Lloyd is still claiming this room in which all this was going on in the basement was not his family home, but he's still saying it's his uncle's home. He doesn't know that they were at his childhood home at this point.
Right.
Detective Dave said, "You know what, Lloyd, we found your old house." And you can see just his face dropped. He's like, "Oh, it's still there?" Detective Dave is like, "Yeah, we paid a visit to it. In fact, we went to the basement." Buddy. You know what? It looked a lot like what you've been describing in regards to Uncle Dickie's basement. But you know what else? We sprayed it for blood, and blood was all over. What do you think about that, Lloyd? Right here, let me take you back to the beginning of this case when Lloyd had to give his opinion on what he believed happened to those girls when he said they were burnt up. And that was all prior to anyone even knowing about that fire up on the mountain. So keep this in mind as Lloyd shares what he thinks happened in the basement. Here we go. Lloyd said what he thinks happened is that one of the girls maybe tried to get away and Dickie lost his temper. And then Lee and Dickie killed her. Okay, so which one do you think tried to get away, Lloyd? Lloyd said he believed it was probably the younger one, meaning Katie, since she was the one that didn't want to go and smoke weed with them that day. And she tried to get her sister not to, by the way. But her mom said, you always have to stick together when you guys go places, which totally makes sense.
It does, but...
Okay, so how do you think she was killed? Here's this old scenario again. Lloyd's trapped, and he knows he must give them something. Lloyd said, okay, well, you know, I was in the basement, and I saw Dickie and my dad in the basement, and I saw Lee break her neck, and Dickie cut her up. He continues that as they were cutting her body up, Dickie started to place the body parts into the bag. Notice not a bag, but the bag. Place the body parts into the bag. Oh, yeah? Where did it happen in the basement? In the back room, the very room that was covered in blood? Lloyd adds that he believes Sheila was kept alive and taken to Virginia to make more porn movies, adding that the last time he saw her, it was in Virginia, back up on that mountain, and she was very much alive. He adds that he believes there were others involved in the crime than just those he mentioned. What Lloyd doesn't quite realize is that he has implicated himself in all of the details of this crime. While Maryland won't be indicting him, Virginia, the one with the death penalty, will be. Just like his usual style, Lloyd has yet one more story before he goes down. Lloyd claims he was there in that basement that day, but he was threatened that if he would not help, he would be next. He would be killed if he did not help clean up the crime scene in that basement. Lloyd then changes the story yet again and said that duffel bag with Katie's body was placed in the car and Uncle Dickie and Lee forced him to drive it to the mountain where Henry would be waiting with a huge fire in which he would dispose little Katie's body. Lloyd claims that his father took off with the car and he never saw it again. Now, police believe that car went up there and it was broken for parts up on that mountain. It went to that mountain. It never came down. They've never been able to locate that car. When asked who all knew about this, Lloyd mentions his father, Lee, Henry, Connie, Patty, which is Dick's wife. When asked why he brought his cousin Teddy into this mess, he simply shrugged and said, scapegoat. On July 14th, 2015, Lloyd was indicted on capital murder in Virginia. Dick Welch was not charged as they couldn't get enough evidence to build a case on him. Detective Dave would be the one to break the news to Lloyd, and he did so just as he had done so many times before, as his bestie, who was shocked by the charges as anyone else. Not true at all. More like Detective Dave wanted to revel in the moment of finally nailing this guy after all these years. Now, a few things to clear up here. How could these girls go willingly with a stranger? Well, they believe marijuana would make sense as Sheila was almost 13 years old, and they had learned that other girls had ventured out with strangers to engage in this experimental phase of trying weed. So what about Lloyd being able to handle the two girls? Now, sadly, there is some evidence that his girlfriend at the time, Helen, was also into some child pornography. And since she's gone now, no way to know for sure, but she had helped him on various other crimes, so it's plausible that she helped him out on this one as well. On September 12th, 2017, Lloyd pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder. He never admitted killing or being responsible for abducting the girls directly. However, over the span from 2012 to 2017, He slowly told detectives what happened, and it was up to them to piece it all together to make the case. Talk about patience. Tell you. He admitted he was involved in the kidnapping, and in Virginia, this means the murder was committed in commission of abduction with intent to defile. His plea meant he was spared the death penalty. Patricia Welch, the wife of Richard Welch, she was the one on the phone call that had the phone tapped and was bullying people. Mm-hmm. She was charged with lying to a grand jury that were investigating the 1975 disappearance of Sheila and Katie. She entered an Alford plea, and we all know that means she didn't admit her guilt, but acknowledges that there's enough evidence to convict her. A judge suspended her sentence of 2 years and instead imposed a $1,000 fine and 5 years of unsupervised good behavior. She was out, basically. At this point, I want to give a giant shout out to author Mark Bowden, who wrote the book about the case entitled The Last Stone. Much of the information comes from this book, as well as the Discovery doc entitled Who Killed the Lyon Sisters. At the end of the book, Mark explores each detective's theory. This is so interesting to me, and this is where I'm going to push you to go buy the book. And I got it for $3 on the Kindle, so cheap. Mm-hmm. At the end of the book, he details each detective's theory about what happened. And surprisingly, they're all vastly different. You have to check it out. The book has so much more information and things I left out either because it was just too much or I accidentally left it out. And if I did that, I apologize. This really is my, like I said earlier, love letter to the author and all those officers who refused to give up. I can't imagine the stamina and the roles that they had to play to get what they needed to make this case after 4 decades and without any bodies. In April 2019, detectives Dave Davis and Chris Humrock were presented with a special commemoration by Maryland Governor Larry Hogan. And that's the story of the Lyon Sisters. Heartbreaking.
That was quite a roller coaster.
I'm telling you. And I had to leave out parts. You know, this, and I can say this now because I don't think I said it earlier. The cast of characters. So Lloyd was in prison for molesting a 10-year-old. What I didn't tell you was it was his soon-to-be stepdaughter. And the graphic nature of how he talks to his buddy, Detective Davis, in it, I can't even put that in here. Like, it gives me the heebie-jeebies because he's just, I don't know.
Unreal.
Mark Bowden talked about that before he became this terrible person, he was a victim too. And with him talking about the molestation of his soon-to-be stepdaughter, he was going to marry the mom. You see that. Like, he doesn't even understand what he did was wrong. It's just shocking. So anyway, get the book. It's called The Last Stone. Kindle has it super cheap. It also has an audio or audible version if you want to listen.
You'll put it in the show notes too, right? Yep.
And
in the sources.
Like I said, I'm sure I left out parts. You can go.
Well, you kind of had to. I mean, you can't
do a deep
get everything
on
in.
The people that they were following. And I just think it's so, I don't know. It's amazing that just that fell on his lap. It fell on the box right when he was about to throw in the towel. That's amazing, you know? It's just
right.
Something else. And those little girls, I think to lose a child, but then both of your children and you just don't know what happened. I don't know how you come back from that. You know what I mean? I don't know how you could go on. And they did. Mary and John Lyon, who, yeah, pretty amazing. I wrote this and it just kept getting longer and longer. And every day I was like, okay, I'm going to wrap it up today. And then I'd stumble upon, I Googled the Leonard that took Teddy for the carpeting. And then when I Googled him and it said that he was in jail for molesting 2 little boys. Well, then I was like, well, that's weird. Well, I didn't make the connection that it was Teddy's sons until I don't know. I'm just saying. And I bet there's a lot more to this. And I would love to sit down with the detectives and it's something. So there you have it. Check out the Discovery doc and then check out the book, The Last Stone by Mark Bowden. And credit goes to all of them. I just retold their story.
Well, great.
There you have
amazing.
It. All right, Jen. Yep. So stay tuned. We'll be here
until next week.
Every Wednesday, 4:00 Central Standard Time. Until then, remember, lock your doors.
And keep passing by those open windows.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Today's episode was researched and written by me, Cam. For more information about this episode, as well as all the sources I used, please check out our show notes, or the podcast website at ourtruecrimepodcast.com. Our True Crime Podcast is developed and created by hosts Jen and Cam. Original music and audio mix of all our True Crime Podcast episodes is courtesy of Nico from We Talk of Dreams. Listener discretion is provided by Edward October from October Pod VHS. Our True Crime Podcast is executive produced by Nico and Dick Vane. Make sure to like and subscribe to Our True Crime Podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. We can be reached on Instagram and Facebook at Our True Crime Podcast or on Twitter at Our True Crime Pod. You can email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com. If you really like the show, make sure to check out our Patreon at Our True Crime Podcast. Our True Crime Podcast is an OTC production.